The room changes again. The shake of Robyn's hands as she reaches out to Kody's arm is both support and torment. Janelle slinks back down in her seat, letting out a big sigh as a shiver runs through her. Meri's eyes stay locked and focused, breaking down every utterance, every look, every facial expression. The courtroom is electric, every tick of the clock ready to detonate into action. The witness continues as Kody's secrets oozed out in these private session excerpts. The tension rises as terms like favoritism, agendas, manipulation fill the atmosphere. The result is dramatic, as Robyn closes her eyes as if trying to absorb this information. The effects are also visible in Christine, as she looks more hardened. Janelle is actually swaying in her chair as if trying to steady herself in this sea of emotions. Meri is also composed as her hands clutch at the edge of notepapers. Suddenly, a revelation is made that is entirely unexpected. One says, "There is documented evidence that one spouse may have acted strategically to influence outcomes in their favor, leveraging emotional cues observed over time." The room is frozen. The wives look at each other in horror. A moment of uncertainty crosses Kody's face, but it's fleeting. Robyn gasps, her hand covering her mouth. A thought takes shape in Christine's mind. Janelle's nails dig into her palms. Even the normally unflappable Meri's mask slips for a nanosecond. The word is out and it shocks them all. They can't believe what has happened. This announcement ignites an immediate reaction. Christine stands up from her chair, her words cutting and accusatory. "Who is this? Who has been playing games with whom? Enough games, Kody. We need the truth." Kody tries to answer, but Robyn cuts him off, her eyes welling up with tears. "Stop, please, for the love of us all. We're all suffering enough." "But, yes, of course, we need the truth." The courtroom can hear the desperation in her voice, the need for an end to the pain of so many years of secrets and suffering. Janelle emerges again, shaking and determined. "I have been quiet, I have taken steps to protect everyone, and we can't just deny it anymore. The consequences of secrets have caught up with us today, whether we like it or not. This session isn't about placing blame just yet. It's about uncovering patterns. But I will say this. The line between intention and blame can become fuzzy quickly. And some truths are harder to live with than others," Meri says calmly, but with a cold undertone. Kody is seated, overwhelmed, every muscle tensed. The emotional pressure of the past weeks, the trial, the argument, the unexpected revelations, comes finally to bear with a physical weight. He glances from one wife to the other, acknowledging the pain, the anger, the ruthless intent carved on each face. He can feel the nooses tightening, the unspoken accusations more condemning than any spoken word. Then the most personal shock follows. The texts read aloud by an attorney, messages that Kody had been choosing to send selectively to each wife, intended as subtle manipulations of opinion, control of perceptions, all couched in something less than complete context. Words that are in the end quite trivial, quite banal on the surface of it all. But the subtlety of their intended meaning left no one in the courtroom uncertain. Robyn's tears flow profusely. Janelle's hands clench into tight fists, while the evidence washes over an eager, rapt, suddenly fulfilled Christine. Meri's mask of composed shock hides a deliberate calculation that this message validates suspicions. The courtroom is charged with emotion. Everyone in the room feels the undertone of betrayal, the pain of purposeful deception, and the lingering tension between love and disappointment. Kody's voice finally breaks through, shaking with emotion. "I never wanted anyone to get hurt. I only..." Christine interrupts him, fighting back tears of anger. But we're hurt, Kody. And we've been hurt for years, and the world sees it now, too. Robyn lays her head in her hands as she silently weeps. The pain of being betrayed is crushing her. Janelle speaks softly as she leans in. Are we even recognizing each other anymore? The judge calls for a brief recess, and this is marked by the sharp banging of the gavel. Yet this is still an atmosphere charged with tension and pent-up emotion, as the aftershocks of accusations, confessions, and devastation continue to reverberate even as all stand to leave. The battle lines are drawn, and this upcoming session could build upon this, causing one to wonder what will happen as this family is forever changed. The final session begins, and the courtroom feels like a pressure cooker. The tension, built over weeks, merely simmering beneath the politeness of nodded heads and controlled breaths, erupts into a palpable force that seems to press against every person present. The air is heavy, almost metallic, charged with anticipation, fear, and anger. Everyone knows that today will decide more than finances or legal outcomes. It will decide the emotional fate of the family. Kody sits at the table, shoulders tense, hands clasped tightly, jaw clenched. Robyn sits beside him, still trembling slightly from the revelations of the previous session. Her eyes are red, evidence of nights spent awake, thinking about every secret that has now been laid bare. Christine is leaning back, composed on the surface, but her eyes are sharp, brimming with the satisfaction of a long-awaited validation. Janelle sits fidgeting nervously, but her hands are steadfast as she readies herself for battle. Meri's calm exterior remains, but her eyes belie a deep intensity. She is ready for the storm. The judge, carrying his gavel, enters and calls the room to immediate attention. We are here to conclude the proceedings regarding family disclosures, emotional distress, and alleged financial mismanagement. Today we will hear the closing statements and review the final evidence. The tension is palpable. Every step, every word spoken seems magnified. The gallery falls silent, as if the walls themselves are holding their collective breath. Kody looks at his wives for some sign. What may come next? Robyn reaches over, lightly laying a hand on his arm, a small gesture of support amidst the storm. The first testimony of the day comes from a final witness, a longtime family friend who has been present through the years to testify about alliances, tensions, and patterns of emotions. Her presence alone sends ripples through the courtroom. I have witnessed moments where communication broke down intentionally. The witness begins, voice steady, carrying the weight of years of observation. I've seen decisions made without full transparency, designed to protect one spouse's interests at the expense of others. These moments cause deep emotional pain and distrust. Robyn's eyes widen slightly, tears rising again. Janelle lets out a sharp breath, her fingers clenching onto the edge of her seat. Christine's lips purse, a silent smirk a traitor to her satisfaction. Meri says nothing, silently absorbing each word as her mind records implications with processor-like accuracy. Kody shifts, feeling the weight of exposure settle atop him like a physical force. Cross-examination begins. Christine's attorney leans forward with his voice sharp and deliberate. Can you provide specific examples of these actions? The witness nods. Yes, there were instances of selective disclosure, manipulation of information, and decisions made without input from all parties concerned. In one case, a very important financial decision was kept from certain spouses, which caused conflict and mistrust. The courtroom falls silent, the weight of the revelations settling on all faces. Robyn squeezes Kody's arm in frustration and despair. Janelle leans back, her jaw tight, in shock and anger, processing the information. Christine's eyes lock on Kody, piercing, as if daring him to answer. Meri's calm mask remains, but the subtle tightening of her hands betrays the inner storm. Then, finally, the clincher. The attorney reveals evidence of various conversations, letters, and documented interactions between Kody and his spouses, which depict patterns of intentional manipulation and favoritism. These documents are prepared methodically, each one more incriminating than the last. Kody's face tightens and his jaw clenches. Robyn's eyes well up with tears as she reads some of the words aloud under her breath, unable to hide her shock. Janelle shifts uncomfortably, the tension in her shoulders releasing her emotional turmoil. Christine leaned forward, absorbing every detail, her satisfaction growing. Meri's eyes dart back and forth between the documents and Kody, calculating every implication of every possible outcome. The crescendo of emotions begins. Robyn rises slightly, her voice trembling but firm. Kody, these are not just documents. These are our lives, our trust, and our hearts. How could you manipulate us for such a long period of time? Kody opens his mouth. The words falter. I didn't intend. Christine cuts in sharply, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. Intent doesn't erase the damage. We've been living with the consequences of your choices for years. It's time you face the reality of what you've done. Janelle speaks finally, her voice stronger now, laced with the emotion that had been pent up. We've all tried to keep peace, to keep this family together. But the lying, the omissions, and manipulations have pushed us all to the limit. Enough. Meri's voice cuts in, calm but incisive. The court is not just a place of legal resolution. The court acts like a mirror to accountability. And actions have consequences. And those consequences today are before each and every one of us. He listens intently, pen poised, to every detail, every emotional tremor, every subtle inflection. Finally, the judge says, "Mr. Brown, you have had quite sufficient time to explain. The evidence today has given a complex picture of both intentional and unintentional harm. Emotionally and financially, several parties have had to bear the brunt of your actions. The court will deliberate with care. The room is thick with silence. Every heartbeat is magnified in a room of total stillness." Robyn sits, trying to calm herself, though her hands shake violently. Janelle's legs quiver under the table. Christine leans forward, eyes riveted on her daughter, every muscle tense. Meri remains impassive on the surface, but her jaw tenses with the inner working of her mind. Kody lets his breath out slowly, feeling the weight of what has been revealed and what might still be to come. And then, the final, explosive moment arrives. A series of audio recordings begins to play in the courtroom between Kody and his wives, where manipulation, subtle coercion, and emotional control become utterly prominent. The recordings feel like vicious, physical blows. Robyn covers her face briefly, shaking. Janelle digs her nails into the table. Christine leans forward, listening intently, a vindictive satisfaction held within her gaze. Meri keeps her cool, but her knuckles go white around her pen. The judge pauses for a moment, allowing the weight of the recordings to sink in. These recordings will be taken into consideration during the final judgment. All parties may reply. Kody tries to respond, his voice strained and weak. "I never meant to hurt anyone. I only—" Robyn cuts in, her voice trembling, yet firm. "We are hurt. Deeply. And you need to face that." Today, it is not about intentions. It's about accountability. Christine's voice then rises, shaking with emotion. We've been patient for years, and today, everything comes to light. You manipulated, deceived, and controlled. And now we see it all. The room is electric with raw emotion. Every person in the space can feel the tension, the betrayal, the heartbreak. Kody's shoulders droop slightly under the weight of exposure. Robyn wipes tears from her face as she stares at him with a mixture of sorrow and resolve. Janelle exhales sharply, eyes glistening. Christine's lips tighten, her satisfaction curbed by the toll taken on the emotions. Meri's calm exterior finally falters for just a moment, revealing the depth of the storm churning inside her. The judge calls for closing statements. Each wife speaks, carefully measured but loaded with emotional weight. Robyn recounts the emotional pain and heartbreak. Janelle emphasizes the erosion of trust. Christine delivers a piercing summary of manipulations. Meri articulates the need for accountability and reflection. Kody tries to respond, but words fall short in the face of undeniable evidence and collective emotion. Finally, the gavel falls. The courtroom is in a sort of suspended animation, as every person braces for the verdict. The weight of weeks of testimony, revelation, and emotional confrontation hangs in the air. The judge gave a measured, solemn statement of finding and the effect upon the family, emphasizing accountability, openness, and consequences of emotional deceit. The session is finally over. The wives say nothing, but their glances at each other say volumes. Relief, remaining hurt, and that spark of hope to rebuild. Kody says nothing, but sits in the quiet stillness of what has just happened and what he now must deal with emotionally. The courtroom clears, with the charged silence, a reminder that, though this chapter may be over, the echoes will reverberate for many years to come. The courtroom falls silent, oppressively so, as the sun shines through the tall windows, casting shadows on the highly polished wooden floors. The scent of highly polished oak timber mingles with the aroma of coffee brewing in the corner of the courtroom. Kody was seated at the center table, with his hands clenched tightly, as he sideways glances at the two women who had become the focus of his world, and now the center of his legal storm. Robyn's eyes are red from more than just the early morning crying. They are red from the realization that every word spoken in this room could potentially be the key to changing the course of her life. Across the room, the deliberate movement of the finger pressing at the edge of the sleeve betrays the turmoil that exists under the placid mask. The fingers of Janelle are drumming nervously against the table. Meri is quietly observing the room with a non-committal expression that can only be described as unreadable, like a placid ocean that belies the turbulent undertow. The judge appears, and paper shuffling and the movement of feet provide the drumroll for this theater of feelings. The courtroom stands up as the full impact of the words that are soon to follow presses like a heavy curtain of velvet. When the judge finally sits down, the courtroom breathes collectively as the very first words are spoken that shall pave the way for weeks of conflict, betrayal, and heartbreak. This court is now in session, declares the judge, his voice stern but controlled. We are here to adjudicate claims of disputed family wealth, financial impropriety, and claims of emotional distress. The word discrepancies lingers in the air like a hangman's noose. Kody swallows hard. He knows what the stakes are. More than just dollars and properties. This is about the relationships that are on the verge of ruptures for years. The eyes of the wives, all 5 of them, shift ever so slightly. Every woman brings her own story, her own secret, her own motives with her into this room. But as the court clerk, calling the case, begins the recitation of the case details, Kody leans back ever so slightly, his mind wandering to the series of events that have led them here. The shared living spaces, the late-night blow-ups, the secrets shared with closed doors, are instead grist for the mill of a drama that promises to lay bare every exposed nerve. Robyn shifts uncomfortably in her seat, feeling Kody's nervous anticipation. "We can get through this," she whispers, more to herself than Kody, though the words seem like a fragile bridge stretched over a deep pit of tensed expectation. "The first prosecution witness," Lemieux says, walking up to the chair where the first witness will sit, "will please come forward." There's a flutter of papers, the click of pens, the voice of the clerk as he reads off the numbers, all of which should be ordinary, pedestrian, but instead seem like time bombs ticking away beneath the surface of the table. "This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds, Lemieux says, pulling out a pad of paper that reads, in black marker, June 1st, first prosecution witness, accountant for the entire family. Has been keeping records for the entire decade. The first prosecution witness, then," Lemieux says again, as he gestures toward the chair, "will please come forward." The irregularities in the allocation of properties, Kody shifts awkwardly. His face pinches, his mouth a thin line. He can sense the fleeting glance from Robyn, a subtle blend of trust and questioning in her eyes. The fingers of Janelle freeze in mid-play. Her lips part in a silent gasp, one that no one else can hear, but a reaction implying she knows the trouble is about to escalate. The pose of Meri remains serene, but her eyes dart from the accountant to the judge with a calculated deliberation, a move that already clouds her mind with the mechanics of her next move. "Your Honor," goes on the accountant, "there are several entries over the course of a number of years which indicate an inconsistency in the financial reports filed." The words strike like rocks, each one resting upon the fragile layer of family unity. The judge's eyebrow goes up in interest as he prepares to probe even more deeply, while the wives' glances speak entire decibels across the room. It is a kind of moment when allegiances shift beneath the surface. Kody swallows hard, his words shaking slightly despite his best efforts to steady his voice. "Your Honor, I can explain each of these incidents. There are circumstances, legitimate circumstances, which require explanation." But even as the words are leaving his mouth, he understands that an explanation won't necessarily solve anything in the courtroom. The courtroom is a harsh spotlight that picks up any and all mistakes, any moment of uncertainty or small treachery that might have been tolerated at home. His words sound confident to his own ears, at least, confident that an explanation will. Christine moves in close. Her tone is low and stinging. "Kody, we all know the truth. It's time everyone hears it." The words cut through the silence of the courtroom, like a hot knife through ice cream. Robyn's eyes go wide with alarm. What Christine knows, she could easily reveal secrets that would remain secrets forevermore. The first cross-examination commences, and the atmosphere changes abruptly. What was perhaps a formal, procedural opening act transforms into a silent duel of wit and will. The judge's gavel marks the tempo of the courtroom like the baton of the leader of a tense orchestra. Every questioning exchange, every selected phrase, seems to be a sword thrust at the family relationships. "You say these were person expenses, when in fact, they were all incurred on joint accounts," begins the attorney, leaning forward slightly, looking at Kody. "You can get back to me when you figure out why these didn't get properly reflected." Kody swallows again, the words sticking in his throat. "There were miscommunications, and timing issues. Nothing intentional. He finally gets out, though the pause is almost painful. The judge nods slowly, but the tension in the room doesn't dissipate, only builds. The audience in the gallery shifts uncomfortably in their seats, aware of the heavy emotional tide hovering over the table. If there were camera flashes in the room, they would have captured the shake of Robyn's hands, the tick in Janelle's jaw, and the strained mask of control Meri is maintaining. It is a scene of controlled mayhem, a precarious balancing act on the verge of shortcutting. As the day moves from morning into afternoon, little details begin to percolate to the surface. Emails, texts, and memories that have lain hidden for years, with whispers of secret grievances and hidden loyalties. Christine allows herself the slightest glimmer of amusement, as if she knows exactly when the truth would blow their carefully constructed illusions to bits. Kody's forehead creases even further, and he starts to sweat, his bead of moisture forming right at his temple. Robyn lets her hand graze his, almost as if she's appealing to him through touch to stay calm, to stay connected, to remind him they'll weather whatever comes their way next. The first session of the day ends, and the tension doesn't let up. Rather, it mingles with them, like a mist that clings and chokes. Kody lets himself sink back into his chair, his exhale measured, his mind racing for his thoughts. Robyn lets her head rest against her hand, eyes drifting off, rebuilding the sequence of events that will soon follow. Christine straightens up, eyes blazing, mind already working for the next move. Janelle's fingers drummed another rhythm, almost rhythmic, almost meditative, and almost realizing that she could control even amidst the storm. Meri, of course, was stone, like she always was, but there's always the tempest lurking within the calm waters. With the closure of the doors as the group takes the break, the intensity in the room is thicker compared to before. The silence in the room is unbroken. Nevertheless, everyone understands that this is merely the beginning, because the secrets that will be spilled, the breaking of the alliances, and the battles that will be fought emotionally are only just the starting point. The scene lingers on the thoughtful face of Kody. The courtroom reconvenes, and the heavy wooden doors groan shut, really closing with a resonating thud that seems to echo through the air, thick with tension. The morning light has moved and cuts in long, sharp lines across the faces of those present, mirroring each woman's worry, determination, and all but uncontained fury. Kody sits forward now, elbows to the table, his fingers interlaced, eyes darting subtly between the wives, trying to foresee the next move. The judge, stern and unbending, gazes down from the bench. We will proceed with the testimony. The next witness may enlighten the court on some very crucial information relative to family expenditures and agreements. The words fell upon the room like the swing of a hammer. First session tense, but now stakes are high. The witness is called, the former household manager who had overseen the daily logistics of the multiple homes and the family's shared schedules. She enters, carrying a folder thick with documents, her heels clicking strongly against the floor. She barely looks at the wives, not giving anything away, before taking her place under oath. The air in the courtroom sharpens, each syllable hanging heavy in the air like smoke, as soon as she starts to talk. During my tenure, she says, voice calm but precise, I have seen several instances when some of the family accounts were used for things that were outside the agreed bounds. Some were property purchases, some were personal expenses, and others, some were doubtful. A soft hum ripples around the room. Christine's head leans forward, eyes narrowing, the wry smile playing at the corners of her mouth, barely perceivable, but full of anticipation. Robyn nibbles on her lip. There's a flicker of panic in her eyes. Janelle's hands clench on the table. Meri retains her composure, her gaze sharpened, analytical to calculate the potential fallout of every utterance. The questioning begins, and immediately the tone is taut. The witness drops dates and amounts into the record with surgical precision. Even the snippets of overheard arguments that suggest fissures in this family that have long been developing. It is no longer just a court of law. It's a theater where secrets are left hanging, a minefield of emotional landmines. You mentioned expenditures outside agreed parameters, begins the attorney, his voice crisp. Can you outline which of these transactions caused most concern? The witness opens the folder carefully, almost with ceremony. One involved a property in Utah, money moved with not all family members knowing. Another involved several luxuries bought for personal reasons, not included in the family budget. She stops, pausing between each word to let them settle. Each one a spark on tinder. Kody stiffens, eyes wide with a suddenly caught breath, belying his outward calm. Robyn's hand covers her mouth as she tries to suppress a gasp. The courtroom seemed to suspend itself in time. Every heartbeat, every shallow intake of breath is magnified. Christine leans in, voice low but cutting. So you're saying decisions were made without full transparency? Her tone isn't just accusatory. It's electric, a subtle challenge aimed not just at Kody himself, but at the entire structure of the family itself. The witness replies quite steadily. Yes, in several instances, information was not given to the key members, leading to confusion, tension, and in some cases, even emotional distress. A flash of disbelief crosses Robyn's face. Distress? She whispers, barely audible, more to herself than anyone else. Yet the words hang heavy, flagrant in their denial. She knows it is true, she has lived it. Yet this said aloud in such a formal setting crystallizes the betrayal. Things get even more heated when the witness starts explaining personal fights, conversations she had heard while working. Kody swallows hard and sets his lips tight, while his jaw clenches. Christine's smirk widens just a bit. The undercurrent is palpable. Alliances are being tested, old wounds reopened, and each wife now starts silently recasting her strategy. Janelle's voice is barely above a whisper at first, sharp with controlled emotion. And these were deliberate. She almost chokes on the word, not from disbelief, but from the raw frustration of watching her family's trust unravel in real time. The witness confirms, the lack of disclosure was not accidental in some instances. It created an environment where emotional conflict was almost inevitable. A sudden, collective intake of breath resounds throughout the gallery. The words cut like bullets, intentional, conflict, unavoidable. The wives shoot glances at each other, some without meaning, some full of meaning. Robyn's eyes shine, a pending tear ready to break free, whereas Christine keeps her face unreadable, but the satisfaction behind her eyes is undisguised. The courtroom falls momentarily silent, as it is weighty for each person to process the revelations. The judge arches an eyebrow, pen in hand, studying the documents and listening intently. It is almost as if the room is holding its collective breath as it waits for the next bombshell. The witness then leans forward slightly, her voice taking on a more dramatic tone. There was one specific incident of communication withheld from a spouse that could have been cleared up, and through attempts to do so, it caused a lot of emotional uproar and some confrontations that possibly could have been avoided. if the disclosure had been made. Robyn's shoulders slouch just a bit. The words aren't news to her, but hearing them articulated in this formal, public setting is crushing. Janelle's jaw clenches, and for an instant, anger and betrayal dance across her face. Meri, ever calm, takes careful notes, her eyes never leaving the witness as she calculates the implications. Christine's gaze locks onto Kody, piercing, almost daring him to respond. Kody's voice finally pipes up, low but labored. Your Honor, these incidents may look problematic, taken out of context. They relate to a very complex family dynamic. Misunderstandings happen. Intent is not always malicious. Christine gives him a glance, her lips curling in a slightly unimpressed smile. Complicated or not, Kody, facts remain facts. You can't deny what's been done. Her words cut through, an almost surgical sharpness to her tone. The witness proceeds, his idea now segueing into documents that detail text exchanges and private emails. The room leans in collectively. Tension so thick it's almost visible. Each message hints at secrets, some minor and some devastating. Hidden discussions, quiet confrontations, and emotional manipulations that were never intended to see the light of day. The gallery shifts uncomfortably. Some whisper under their breath, while others sit frozen, eyes wide. Even the judge's expression manages to harden, a subtle frown signaling the serious situation. Kody feels his mind racing, every explanation thinner than it should, every denial shadowed with the weight of proof. Robyn reaches over and takes a light grasp on his hand. We need to make it through, she says, her voice near inaudible but dogged. Kody simply nods his head, though inside he questions how much of the life they had shared would survive this kind of exposure. As the session goes on, tension escalates with every new revelation. Janelle finally speaks out, her voice steady but with a tremble of raw emotion. We've all lived with these secrets for years, and now everyone knows. How do we move forward when trust has been shattered so publicly? The witness turns to her briefly, the weight in her words acknowledged. I can only present facts as I observed them, she says. It is up to this court and the family to interpret the implications. Then comes the moment no one sees coming. A folder slides across the table, a quiet, almost innocent gesture. But inside is a letter from an anonymous source, detailing a betrayal so intimate it could fracture relationships beyond repair. The words are shocking, naming specific incidents that no one expected to become public. Robyn's eyes widen. Janelle's hands shake. Christine leans forward, anticipation glinting in her gaze. Meri keeps her cool exterior, but her fingers dig deeper into her pen. Kody swallows hard, feeling the room spin slightly, as though gravity itself has shifted. The judge looks up. His voice is steady, weighted. This document will be entered into evidence. Each party will have an opportunity to respond. The room is electric with suspense. Every heartbeat seems amplified. Every breath a countdown to chaos. Temporarily, the session gets adjourned, but the tension does not dissipate. It lingers thick as the summer heat, promising that when they return, the courtroom would feel like a battlefield. So what? The courtroom is even more oppressive than before as all of them come back from the break. The atmosphere is one of anticipation that is almost palpable and suffocating, as tension between Kody and his wives is now almost palpable, like electricity before lightning flashes. Each step of the bailiff's feet on the highly polished floor is loud enough to herald the renewal of a fight that has become even more personal and combustible than before. Kody sits erect in his chair, hands clasped together in front of him, fists clenched in anger. The eyes of his wives are upon him, each filled with her own unique amalgamation of pain, anger, and resentment. Robyn's mouth is pinched shut, and she is breathing shallowly, her chest quivering minutely as she fights to maintain her composure. Christine has leaned back in her chair, arms crossed over her chest, and there is a glint in her eye that speaks of the fleeting nature of the perfect strike. The tapping of Janelle's fingers on the table has ceased to be any indication of her calm demeanor, and now merely ticks down the seconds until the explosion. Meri, as always, is the mystery, her body relaxed in calm contrast to the motive calculation in her eyes. The court clerk clears her throat and calls the next witness. This one is a family friend who has had access to private conversations and disputes for many years. The courtroom quietens. Everyone understands that the evidence that will come forth will be a deciding factor in a way no one within was able to expect. The friend enters the courtroom calmly and confidently with one folder of documents. Her eyes glance at each of the wives before settling on Kody with a depth of intensity that makes him shift uncomfortably in his seat. "Please state your name for the record," the clerk asks. "Elizabeth Harris," repeats the witness, speaking calmly with a strong underlying tone. The judge nods, and the interrogation begins, but the tone immediately shifts. The already tense air hangs on the brink of descending into emotional anarchy. Elizabeth begins to outline a series of personal incidents that she has witnessed over the years, incidents that were insignificant enough at the time, but in the rearview mirror, foreshadow larger problems within the family. "At some family gatherings during the holidays," she continues, "I witnessed some conversations between Kody and Christine that seemed like reserve and favoritism against other wives. This has left other family members hurt and confused." Robyn's hand finds its way to her mouth in almost inaudible shock, sensing almost a gasp. The words are more damaging with each cut of the blade. Even the accusations, though unexpected, are unexpected in the environments of the court. Christine stands up with resolution in pursed lips, and gleams in her eyes cast momentarily at Kody in an "I told you so" without speaking. Janelle's hands shake just a little, revealing her inner struggle. She parts her mouth to speak, then stops, deciding that any interruption would make her look defensive, or perhaps worse, guilty. Meri inches closer, pen in her possession, eyes squinting, following every minute detail. Kody shifts awkwardly, struggling to keep himself together, but the grip on the table speaks of the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. "Did you ever have the opportunity to observe situations where financial choices were entered into without complete disclosure?" the attorney asks, her voice steady and questioning. Elizabeth responds, "Yes. A number of times, funding was allocated or transferred without notice to all members of the family." She glances quickly at Kody before continuing. "In one case, quite an amount was transferred to pay some personal bill. Only later did this come to light when other members inquired about some shortfalls." The courtroom falls silent, the words drifting in the air like smoke. One of Robyn's eyes wells up with tears, and she gives Kody's hand a light squeeze, not in comfort, but as if in anticipation of being grounded. Something that will protect her from the tempest that brews. There is a quick flicker of satisfaction on his lips from Christine. Then comes the bombshell, the point that upends the whole dynamic of tension in the room. Elizabeth pulls a single envelope from her folder, yellowed ever so slightly with age. "This letter," she says, her voice low but ringing, "came to light among Kody's belongings, penned by one of the wives. It is full of observations about couplings of family members, as well as advice which suggests a manipulation of emotional as well as decision-making processes." Gasps softly resonate through the courtroom. Kody's eyes widened slightly. This evidence was certainly unexpected to him. Robyn's gaze drops, her lip biting harder as her hand begins to shake. Janelle's fingers grasp the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white with tension. Christine leans forward, almost hungrily, as if she knows precisely when and how her brother's defenses will fall apart. Meri's composed demeanor continues to hold, her slightly narrowed eyes a revelation of her surprise at this news. The attorney nods towards Kody. "Mr. Brown, can you shed some light on the existence of this letter and the possible intentional manipulation of information in it?" Kody swallows hard. The courtroom seems to shrink, with the walls pressing in on him. I can explain," he begins, his throat strained with tension. "That letter was written many years ago as part of a reflective mood, not as an attempt to wound anyone. These personal messages were not meant for public viewing, for other people's eyes. Personal notes that were intentionally concealed from the people who trusted you the most. That's a little different from innocent reflection, don't you think?" Christine's biting tone slashes through the tension, echoing through the room. Robyn shakes her head, and the tears flow silently. "Kody, how could you?" "All these years," she asks, looking at Kody with eyes full of grief and shock. Janelle finds her voice, shaking but resilient. "We've all been living with shadows over our heads, wondering who to trust and when the next dose of deception would come." But Meri keeps her composure, although there is a flicker of weakness in her gaze, now that she begins to understand the implications for herself of this testimony. The room seems poised on the brink of collapse, fuel being piled onto a fire that cannot be contained. The judge leans slightly forward. "Now, Mr. Brown, this letter and the observations made by the witness will require context and explanation. The court will carefully consider these factors of credibility. There is no let-up in the tension. There is a buzz to the air, a charged electric quality, as if any one of a dozen sparks might set off a riot of emotion." Kody's hands shake ever so slightly, a manifestation of his repression. Robyn reaches over to take his hand, a plea for groundedness in the storm. Christine's smirk recedes a little, to be replaced by a calculating stare. Janelle gasps, while Meri's eyes dart back and forth, probing every morsel, every pause, every implication. But then comes the twist, the murmured utterance in the gallery, conveyed through the crowd from one onlooker to another, that another, even more intimate secret could shortly be laid bare. The courtroom takes its breath collectively, realizing that what has already transpired could merely mark the beginning. The wives regard one another nervously, their patience growing thin around the edges. Kody shifts slightly in his seat, his face chalk white with the realization that the disclosures could run far deeper than he had ever looked for. As the session is almost over, Elizabeth lays down the last piece of evidence, a set of recordings. The voices are identifiable. This is not necessarily G and Tim speaking, though their tone is evident, and this has clearly long undermined the surface tension with fear and manipulation. Each and every nuance of conversation recorded could betray years of deception. Robyn's lips open slightly as a tear rolls down her cheek. Janelle's hands are shaking uncontrollably in front of her. Christine senses an opportunity as she leans in eagerly, while Meri's stoic expression cracks for the first time in front of Meri's worry. Kody's face is tight as he looks back and forth between the tape recording and the judge, as he realizes that the whole courtroom is now in on the intimate secrets of these relationships. The gavel falls, and the courtroom is adjourned for the day. However, the storm does not end there. The whispers of deceit, the cries of pain, and the shattering of trust are forever imprinted in the courtroom, well after everyone has departed. The courtroom hangs thick with tension as the doors swing open for the next round of proceedings. The atmosphere feels heavier than before, almost choking with the intensity of expectation and the aftershocks of the last bombshell drops. The wives precede Kody into the courtroom, their faces etched with the measures of caution, anger, and resolve that must be drawn on for this meeting, if nothing else, for their family's sake. Robyn takes her place, her hands clenched together, in her lap, her fingers entwining as if she can anchor herself against the wave of feelings rising up inside her. She casts a quick glance at Kody, the unspoken question hanging between them. How much more can we take? Christine leans back in her seat, her arms crossed across her chest, but her eyes are shining with excitement, ready to rip away the veil and lay bare whatever she needs, armed with years of insight and now the knowledge that her suspicions have been proved correct by the courts. Janelle shifts uncomfortably, crossing and then uncrossing her legs, her fingernails drumming out a nervous tempo on the table. Meri sits still, serene, but her eyes are narrowed, sizing up every possible consequence. The judge settles into his chair, his eyes sweeping the room with calm assurance, despite the tension arcing through the air that no gavel can shake. "We will proceed," he declares. "Today, the court will hear testimony that may address allegations of emotional distress and miscommunication. In this instance, it appears as though the whole gallery is leaning in, as if awaiting testimony from the walls themselves to attest to this developing play. The witness in this trial is someone who has had some connection with various family members and has come to offer testimony about emotional relationships and communication issues and their various psychological effects upon the wives. The witness is indeed someone who carries some gravity with him even before he utters a single word." "Please state your name for the record," the clerk asks. "Dr. Emily Harris." The therapist answers calmly, with a firm voice and eyes scanning the room with inner intensity. And the questioning starts. And right away, the mood in the courtroom becomes charged. There had been tension, then electricity. Every word that follows carries heightened meaning. Dr. Harris talks of several years of observation, of moments when Kody's choices, or failure to communicate, left the wives in pain. The therapist speaks, and the corners of Robyn's eyes glimmer with moisture. It's as if the truth behind these observations has been reflected to her through a mirror she's lived with in her heart all these years. "You mean to say these men will take advantage of me when I'm with them?" Janelle's jaw clenches, her fists clenching underneath the table. Christine's lips press in and up slightly, her mouth twisting with a satisfied twitch. "You're saying these men will take advantage of me when I am with them?" In contrast to the rest, Meri's expressions don't show any change. "Dr. Harris, can you tell us the emotional effect that these behaviors had on the wives?" the attorney asks, voice firm, yet electric with the implication of what is soon to be disclosed. The tone of the therapist's voice is still calm but precise. "These behaviors led to persistent stress, anxiety, and insecurity among the spouses. Some persons experienced emotional fatigue, trust concerns, as well as situations of acute emotional distress. Some situations led to conflicts that could have been prevented with a free flow of communication." A murmur ripples through the courtroom. Robyn takes a sharp breath, her fists clenched in her lap. Kody slouches back in his chair, his fingers laced through each other, his jaw clenched. The meaning of these words looms over him like a storm cloud. Christine's eyes flicker to him, a silent communication. The truth is revealed, and it cannot be denied. After that, the first explosion of the term begins. Janelle stands up ever so slightly, with a shaking but firm voice. Kody, for years we have been walking on eggshells, unsure of what had been withheld, or what had been manipulated. I trusted you, and yet here we are, naked and humiliated before the whole world. Kody swallows, tries to compose an answer. But the shake in his voice gives him away. I never meant for it to go this far. There were always excuses, explanations, miscommunications. Miscommunications. Kody, this wasn't a miscommunication. This was intentional, and now everybody gets it. You've been manipulating in order to control the outcome, and we're just facing the fact. Christine cuts in chilly, her voice laced with skepticism.